Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home. We're excited to have you listen in on our conversation. This is a channel created by women, empowering women to take intentional action in creating the life they want. With your host, Shanda Ceretti, certified life coach, and Carla Center subconscious healer. So today we're going to talk about sharing. This is coming from our last episode. It's like a spin-off. I'm super excited to where this goes. As you know, Shanda and I, we right before our recordings, we just come up with our topics and allow it to go so that you get this truly authentic conversation instead of us being scripted and being somebody besides our authentic self, because what we want is for you to be your authentic self. So what does sharing bring up for you, Shanda?
Oh, yeah. So I love that we're talking about this. And like you said, Carla, this is definitely an extension or spin-off of our conversation from last week. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen. That was all around being intentional and cultivating awareness in your everyday life. So sharing, I mean, I feel like it's going to start really broad and really big, and we're just going to dive deep on something or a few things, which is what we tend to do. So, what this brings up for me is sharing. Every time I hear that word, I always think of the phrase that my son brought home one day from daycare, and it is sharing means caring, right? And I love that so much because I'm like, it really does. And it also allows for an opportunity to connect with other people. When we're sharing in anything, we're connecting with people around us, right? And if you know anything about the healing process or should know anything about the healing process, it's that it happens in connection, in community. And community, guys, does not mean multiple people. Community can mean two people. Okay.
Right.
So, sharing, I want to talk about sharing your experiences. I want to talk about sharing your journey, right? I want to talk about sharing the things that are working for you, sharing the things that aren't working for you. And then also, obviously, talking about sharing your thoughts and your feelings, which those tend to be the most tricky or most sticky for us, is to
Yeah.
share our genuine thoughts and feelings about things, especially with the people who are closest to us. And I find that so interesting, right? I don't know about you, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, "Oh yeah, I had no problem talking to this group of people or talking there or talking at that event because I didn't know them."
Right.
And it's like, how interesting that we can connect on a deeper level with people we don't even know,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I want you to run with that. I feel like you've got something right on the tip of your tongue that you want to share.
Right. And for me, it brought up vulnerability. When you're sharing and being vulnerable and being super nice, and like as you're talking about, people were able to share when they didn't know anybody, and it can be that way on social media or anything. I think about all the times in my life I had this like super bad anxiety, and the people that I knew that wanted to support me, having them there made it worse
Mm,
because I didn't want to share any fumbles with them. I had created this picture for them, right?
yeah.
And sharing who I truly was, that authentic self, being vulnerable with them was terrifying,
Mm,
terrifying. And so we are able to, one of the things about sharing ourselves, sometimes we are able to share with other people because we've convinced ourselves most likely we will never come into contact with those people again.
right.
Um, and they will come. Some people will just keep coming into our lives in different ways, shapes, or form, even if we think we walked away and then they show up, right?
Mm,
And they got to see our vulnerability. When the people that we want to connect with most, the people we have relationships with that we want to flourish, when we aren't sharing our true selves with them, when we're not being vulnerable, we're not sharing and feelings, Shanda's right. Feelings can get sticky,
mhm,
right? When we're not sharing who we truly are deep down and just open to them really seeing us and not judging us, we're missing out on that true connection with the people in our lives.
Yes, that's, I literally just wrote that down. Yeah, it's like when we can express ourselves, first of all, it's a beautiful opportunity to get comfortable or be uncomfortable expressing yourself, right? Because I find that we so easily express ourselves when we feel comfortable, but it's almost like it's even more important to express ourselves when we feel uncomfortable to do so, because that means that whatever that thing is really on your heart, right? That's why you feel uncomfortable, because you're like, ooh. And I learned something um, in coaching and in my practice, and I think it's a beautiful thing when it comes to creating connection, when it comes to going deeper with people, and when it comes to, I want to even say transformation. I learned that sometimes, now it may not be applicable across the board, but sometimes we need to be willing to risk the relationship. And I don't mean in a way where it's going to like blow up in your face and that is what it is. But what I mean is that we got to be willing to say the things that we're most afraid to say. And here's why: we have our own thoughts and feelings about
Mhm.
the thing, and so do they. We have our own experience, and so do they. We have our own circumstances, and so do they. So we might feel like it's this crazy, oh my gosh, I could never say this thing. But if you can open up yourself to be vulnerable, be brave, be courageous, and share from a place of love to everybody, not
Right.
from like a place of being malicious or trying to hurt somebody, but from a loving place, from your heart. When we share, oftentimes you'll walk away from that conversation being, wow, that went a lot better than I thought it was going to go.
Right.
Right. And you'll be like completely dumbfounded of like, I thought that was going to go this way. Like, we like to catastrophize. We like to assume the worst. We like to think things are going to be like so hard and so awful. But what we fail to see sometimes are the positive opportunities that are there too, right? We always focus on the negative because that's the way we're wired. That's the way we're wired for survival. So it's not to anyone's fault. It's just
Right.
in our DNA. But we need to train our brain once again to look for the positive opportunities. If you're going to be willing to look and focus on the negative, okay, fine. But any debater, right? Any person who gets into conversation with people would tell you, you have to look at both sides. You have to
Right.
look at the pros and the cons. You can't just focus on one side. So, what I'm getting at here is just be open to what if the thoughts and feelings you currently have about sharing what it is you want to share aren't true? What if something else happens? What if you get to have a deeper connection with your partner or your children or your parents or your spouse, um, whatever it is?
Right. And as you do this, you see a different connection and a growth, and you see also where possibly your thoughts and feelings have shifted. With my partner works when he works out of town often, and a new opportunity came up. We always share before he makes a decision, just so that I know what page he's on and all of that. And I shared with him, like, when he asked me, well, what do you think? I said, what brings you the most peace? And I have your back. And and I told him this, he's like, okay, before I would have thought his choice equaled how much he loved me.
Right.
I had this fear, if I was open, he was going to make a choice that reflect his feelings about me, when that's not truly what it is. And so I shared with him, because I could see that he's like, are you sure? That he was, I said, quite honestly, once upon a time, I would have thought whatever your choice was equaled how you felt about me, because I haven't seen you. He's been gone for a while. That's why I'm saying that. So he's going to be back for a little bit and he has to be gone again. But this is about his job, what he does. This is part of his journey. It has not a thing to do with me. Does he care about my feelings and my thoughts? He absolutely does. Whereas from my past, that is not what my perception was of any relationship I had. that it was always somebody else's actions equaled what they thought and felt about me.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've shared with him and I've grown, we've learned to communicate in a way where I understand where he's coming from and he understands where I'm coming from. Do we sometimes not have the exactly what we thought? Yeah. And we get to work through that. But as I share myself, I get to create this relationship that I have always dreamed of. Like it is a give and take, and I no longer fear that it's something different than I think. I'm not wondering what he's thinking. The first thing he said to me, by the way, when we started dating is, I'm probably not thinking anything when you think there's all these thoughts in my head, by the way, which I appreciate him sharing that with me because we so much as women, in my experience, women, we like create all this stuff that's going on in somebody else's head, especially our partners. And then when they share with us, we're like, that's not even what I thought. And so as I share who I am with him, our relationship has only gotten stronger.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know what this reminds me of is birthrights. I think I've talked about birthrights on here before, but the reason why we are so fearful and afraid and we worry so much about sharing authentically from our heart, from my perspective and my understanding, is that because we have this birthright, okay, and it jeopardizes this birthright that we have, which is to belong, right?
Yes.
It's this tribe mentality, it's the community mentality, right? And when we feel like what we say or do might affect whether we belong, whether we don't belong, whether we're accepted, whether we're not accepted, we kind of base our choices on how much we share, with who we share, what we share around that, right? How close am I with you? Or what is our involvement? What is our relationship? How can this be used against me? Can I trust you? All those things,
Right.
right? Those are just human, um, um, I want to call them like strategic human um, buttons or fail safes. There we go. Something like that,
Yeah.
right? Where we're always analyzing, we're always sizing up, because again, it just comes down to survival. So even though we've evolved, like, you know, so much over these years, we still have these old ways of being that we get to be aware of, we get to recognize so that we can work around them, right? So when we feel like our birthright to belong has been impaired, we will go to work and do every single thing that we possibly can to repair it.
Right.
But here's the caveat to this, is that that birthright is inherent. That's why it's called a birthright. It's not something you need to earn. It's not something that can be taken away. It's always there. So when you can, and it will take time, but when you can accept that idea, that paradigm, your life will shift, because you'll stop working to people please and to gain approval. And you'll be able to step more into your authenticity, which is where the most beautiful sharing happens, right? When we can share from our heart, even though that person might not like every single word that's coming out of our mouth. It's okay. And you get to communicate that part too. It's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. But what if sharing the hardest things allows that person to grow even more, right? What if when we don't share this information, we're doing our friends and our family and our loved ones a disservice by not sharing, right? We all have blind spots. We can't always see them. So, how great of a gift would it be if your friends and family could help you see those blind spots?
That is so beautiful. And the thing is that when we don't share, we're burying ourselves under all of this stuff, that authentic
Yeah.
self you're talking about. So when we share, we also open up the space for somebody to share their authentic self, like you're talking about. So I have women come to me all the time that say, I don't even know who I am. And that is because they have shut down that sharing of who they are, with just bringing up all the different things that feel safe with their connection with somebody else. And that gets in the way of truly connecting with somebody and truly connecting with yourself, because all these beautiful little, I don't want, they're just little facets of you that somebody has told you wasn't okay. By the way, that has to do with them and not to do with you 100%. You no longer feel okay sharing those little facets of yourself with even you. Like, it's scary, because then you're going to judge you, because I'm going to say the most critical person has always been me with me. I may have pushed that off on somebody else, and like, it's super easy when we're in that mode to write down the list of all the bad things somebody else has criticized us for. But if you sat down and thought about, when you share and it didn't turn out well, how many things did you criticize yourself for? How many things did you make yourself wrong for that somebody else probably didn't even notice? Didn't even notice. Like I was talking about in the last thing about me coughing in the middle of a room. Probably most of the people didn't even notice, unless they were like worried about my well-being. They weren't thinking, oh my gosh, look at what just happened with her. So we have boxed ourselves down when we don't share, to not even share with ourselves who this beautiful, amazing, authentic being is. And as we share and we just allow ourselves to feel the beautiful connection with somebody else, our light starts to show. And we're no longer in our head, like our channel talks about. We go from our head down into our heart and just shine this amazing light that is us, that's nobody else. No, we are this unique, amazing being that is different than somebody else. And will everybody else like be like, oh, I love that? Probably not, because that has to do with their own stuff, by the way. We all judge from our own wounds and our own filters and all that stuff. It doesn't really have to do with somebody else, it has to do with ourselves. And most of the time we're judging something we don't like about ourselves. But as we share this, like, light that's within us goes from this little, like, think about a candle, and if you put a glass over it, that flame can only last so long. But when we open it up, when we pull off those, the cage that we've kept ourselves in, I'm only going to share this bunch of me, the flame just like brightens the room, and it can go on forever.
Absolutely. I love that you brought in the piece about not just sharing our journey, our experiences, our thoughts and feelings, but sharing who we are, right? Sharing about us, sharing all the many facets and little quirks and things about who we are, and knowing that it's okay to express all of it,
Yeah.
right? And even I want to encourage you to express all of it. I want to encourage you to accept all of it, because I do something so powerful with my clients. It's probably one of my favorite things I do. Carla, you and I have talked about this too before, and it's called parts work. And this is so profound because if you look at the different personalities that you have within your being, there are many of them. And depending on what you're doing, what decisions you're making, what actions you're taking, different parts are on board and other parts are not on board. Some of the hurt parts or the damaged parts or whatever traumatized parts, they all have their play and they all have their role. And when you can accept that all of the parts of you, right, and communicate to all of the parts of you, that's when you find this, what everybody talks about, this sense of wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it simply means communicating, connecting, sharing, and accepting all the things that make you you. I'm talking about the cranky you, the fun you, the short-tempered you, the comedic you, the loving you, the rough and tumble you, like everything, you name it, the bitchy you, whatever, all of it, right? When you are like, okay, listen, You and you and you and you and all of you make me who I am, right?
Yes.
And there's a place for all of you. No matter
Yes.
what the situation, there's always a place. Sometimes we like to downplay or wish we didn't have certain characteristics. Like, I wish I wasn't a short fuse. But what if that short fuse comes into play? I'll make up an example. Let's just say somebody disrespects a loved one and you're like absolutely not putting up with that and you stick up for them. Is that such a bad thing that you might have a short fuse, or you might be defensive, even, you know what I mean? Like, all of
Mhm.
our characteristics, all of our facets have a role to play, and it's all about when they come online. And that's something we get to communicate, we get to share, we get to work on. I feel like we went way off on a tangent here, but I do believe that this all comes back to the sharing who we truly are, right? And sharing with ourselves who we truly are, like exposing all of our parts, even the ones we are uncomfortable with.
Right. And as we share our parts, like I was talking about our light, but you're talking about the little parts. Some people would think somebody who is defensive, it's about judging, right?
Right.
So we're super sensitive if we think that we're argumentative sometimes. Other people aren't. But there are so many different roles in this world. We're all the piece of this big, beautiful puzzle. Whereas, like, think about defense attorneys, they need to be that way, right? Do we think that anybody is that's just who they are, that's 100% straight across the board? It's not. We all have these little bits and pieces, and we're this, like I was saying, unique. We're this shape that fits in with everybody else. This part of us complements somebody else's part and makes this beautiful picture. And if we don't judge ourselves, if we allow ourselves just to be who we are, we share the true authentic person we are, we can make magic together. If, like, I was the smart girl and I've had people come to me that said they aren't as smart as me, which, by the way, I never believe that, because your intelligence is in a different place. If you're mechanically inclined, can I learn the stuff you do? Yes, but it's not automatic for me, whereas other things are automatic for me. And as we share ourselves, we see how much we can create together instead of being like this, working against ourselves and each other, keeping our life small.
Yeah.
We get to expand as we
Yeah.
share.
Yeah. And I love what you were saying about the defense attorney. It's like, I'm sure every single one of us has had this experience, whether we were the person it being said about or we were the person who said it, where with somebody or you met somebody in a certain atmosphere, and then you meet them again later, or maybe it's somebody from work and you see them this one way at work, but then you see them outside of work and you're like, oh wow, I never knew you were like this, or I thought you were always like this. I'm sure we've all heard and said that sentence, right?
Right.
Any variation of that. And it's like, we're so quick to, all of us, we're so quick to judge and stamp somebody with they're this, a label, they're that,
Mhm.
they're that, they're that. So how interesting if, and we got to do this last year, Carla, with ourselves and with
Mhm.
other members who went through a leadership program with us, which is where we met everybody, by the way.
Yeah.
And we got to share with people who maybe we were feeling like this, right?
Mhm.
We got to share that we were feeling like this, and it was a pretty scary experience for the first time. And
Yes.
the more you practice it, the more you were authentic and you were vulnerable, the easier it got. And I will tell you, every single time I had that connection with somebody, that conversation with somebody, it allowed for a better and deeper understanding of who they are and what we actually had in common. It
Right.
blew my mind every single time. I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually love you, or I think the world of you, or whatever, whatever, whatever. Right? So sharing is caring, right?
Right.
In so many different ways. It's caring for you, it's caring for others, it's allowing for yourself and other people to grow on their own scale, on your own scale, and together, right?
Right. And when we did, so I always, when we did this, the leadership, and you are one of my greatest gifts from that leadership thing, our relationship and our connection. So I would choose, even though came across as super shy, super introverted, I always picked the people that were like nails on a chalkboard to me. Like, I'm like, what is about them?
Mm,
And I get to know them because I'm obviously got some kind of like judgment about them. And every time they were these kind, wonderful people, and most of them thought they would say what a wonderful person I was. I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt like it was like this when it
yeah,
really wasn't.
right.
And so I took that moment to share me with them and allowed them to share them with me. And the connection I would, one of the people that I'm closest with, the very first thing that I saw, like we were together for a long time in this leadership thing. I was like, oh my gosh, so like it felt opposite. She just like says what she wants to say. She just like, and I was very like, I thought before I spoke, I was very like, oh, this is the way I have to be. Even though I was never that way with my clients, I was when it was in a big group. And we are super close. We talk almost every day. And had I stayed with that and not shared me and allow her to share herself, I probably would have missed out on this wonderful experience with this person. Like we went and saw uh we went and saw Abe, Abraham. Gosh, I can't even think of it. We went and saw Abraham together, had this really like amazing experience together. But when I first saw her, I was like, oh my gosh, she was too much for me because of how I felt about myself. But as I learned to share, I learned to appreciate her and be so thankful that I had her in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and it, the more we share of ourselves, the more we give ourselves opportunities to truly like experience so many more things than we would have if we kept ourselves super closed down and this is the way the world is.
Yeah. And I mean, what I'm taking away from what you're sharing as well, and from my experience too, is that when we feel like somebody rubs us the wrong way, or when we feel like maybe even like jealous, or like, oh, I wish I was that way, or wish I could say things, or I
Mhm.
wish I could do right, all those things, that's a that's a like a flag for you to be like, oh, hang on a second, this is an area in my life that I haven't accepted about myself, or where I dim my own light.
Yes.
So maybe you're like, "Ooh, I wish I could say the things that are on my mind like she does." So it's like, "Ooh, hang on, that is huge insight. Like, where do I not allow myself to share my voice when I feel like I'm really called to do that?" Right? So again, coming back to when we share, we learn about other people, we learn about us, and it's truly a gift. It's an opportunity to grow, which is like, how can you deny that for yourself and for others, right? Like, it just seems so natural that we would want to be drawn to that and to give that and receive that, right?
Right. Right. And and we're talking about just sharing that with strangers, but just to get to do that with our relationships with like our significant others, with our children, um, we get to share a part of us when we are that way that maybe they wouldn't have seen. And it can grow the relationships in a way that you never expected.
Yeah.
um they will not see things the way you see things because we have our own filters, we have our own experiences. And when you share things, when you share who you are, you open up the possibility of so much that you would never expected. um and that was one of the lessons I learned with us doing the leadership. Like, I could always grow with clients, but truly being vulnerable with another person in a way that I had never allowed myself has expanded my relationships in such a way that I would have never expected. And when you're a healer, when you're a coach, I mean, we are continuous, we have so much knowledge, and we work. I have never met a healer or a coach that doesn't was not on their own journey before they did, right? The reason we do what we do is because we want to share with the world. We want you to have this amazing journey yourself, and to be this catalyst that allows you to have the most joyous life possible. Um, and so we get sometimes so much that we're like, we will share with certain people because it's comfortable. And the person at home is the scariest person to share with. So I truly encourage you to share who you are with that person, even the little things that you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to judge me. I remember being in a relationship and being afraid someday he would figure out who I was, because I'd always shared all of the positive. I had shared all of this, the kind, loving, nurturing person. And like Shanda was saying, there's the parts work, and the other little parts that I had judged or somebody else had told me was wrong. That once this person who I loved with my whole heart saw that they would reject me. And it limits your interactions, it limits your relationships. When you share that, you share something together, and it allows them to share
Yeah.
in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I shared my trauma and what had happened to me when I was younger with my family, right? I mean, growing up, I had only shared it with honestly a couple best friends. And I was in my 20s. I was in my mid to late 20s actually when I shared it with my certain family members. And I remember one of the responses that I got was, "Oh my gosh, now that I know this about you, so many things make so much more sense." And it was like I was worried that it would kind of put a wedge in between certain relationships, but instead of doing that, it removed a wedge that was already there that I didn't even know was there, right?
Right.
So by us sharing, and specifically sharing, encouraging our children to share, right? To be authentic, to speak from their heart. It's we're encouraging them to shine their light. We're
Yeah.
encouraging them to be who they are. We're encouraging them to be seen. So for anybody who has ever felt like they have not been seen, this is your opportunity. It's through sharing, because through sharing, you will feel seen for maybe the first time in your entire life. And that is an experience that you'll never forget, right? It's like when you feel like you are in front of whoever it is, exposing yourself in the best ways and in all ways, and they love you no matter what, right? You're seen, you're authentic. It's just beautiful. So I want to encourage you, just even just starting small, right? Just starting to share more about yourself in any way, and especially sharing this journey wherever you
Yes.
are. Start sharing it with your friends, with your family. Let people know about what your healing has been like, what your journey has been like, because that will also help your journey and help your healing, right? And I'll always go back to the phrase or the sentence, we can't heal in isolation. We can't heal in the closet, right? We need in the darkness. We need to be in the light. We need to share. We need to be open. So that is my encouragement from this conversation today, all around sharing, which I knew we were going to go somewhere really cool and really deep. You just
Yeah.
wasn't sure where that was.
Right. And I love where we went with it. And it's so beautiful. And I love that you brought up children, because,
Yeah.
our children do see what we do.
Yeah.
And when we allow them to share who they authentically are, and which means all the parts of you, right? All the parts of them, it allows them, you're helping them on their own healing journey, allowing them to be, because there will be people who, because of their own stuff and don't feel the ability to share themselves, will be like, right. But that has nothing to do with you, has
Right.
nothing to do with you. The beauty of sharing yourself with your children is showing them it's okay. All of the parts of you are okay,
Yep.
just like all the parts of them are okay. They're going to have their days where they're overwhelmed, where they're like little pieces and you're like like my granddaughter is one of the sassiest little girls that you ever met in your life. And sometimes I sit down with her and I talk to her and I encourage her, I'm not telling you not to be this way, but I want you to think about the fact how somebody in the family might not think that when you say, what are you bringing me when you come over,
Mm.
do share that, but also what are you meaning, what are you sharing, you're asking them what they're sharing with you, right? And so to allow people, this girl is so beautiful and like a handful, and my daughter's like, mom, what am I going to do, the boys are so much more mellow. And I said she is starting in a space of just being her, and that is such a beautiful space to start in, because when we're like, all those things, don't be noisy, don't be this, don't be that. So we like, but when we
Shut them down.
show our children they can be who they are, like their journey is going to look so different than ours because we allowed them to be them,
Yeah.
to love every part of them.
Yeah. Yeah. We get to encourage them to be who they are, but also teach them that there's loving ways,
Yeah.
right? There's certain language that might be received
Right.
in a
Right.
like differently than other language. And at the end of it, you literally, as you were saying it, I wrote it down. At the end of all of this sharing, what we're teaching ourselves, what we're teaching our kids, what we're teaching anybody by sharing is that it's okay to share, right? And we encourage them to step into that same opportunity, because honestly, that's where your growth is there in that
Mm-hmm.
sharing, right? It truly is. And that might not even make sense for some of you. You might be like, what is she talking about? Growth isn't sharing, but it really is, because you're putting yourself out there in ways that you might not have before. You're learning new things about yourself, and you're creating that connection, you're creating that intimacy. And at the end of the day, it all comes back to authenticity, which is what we all strive for, what we all
Right.
want, right? That is that natural state, is being who we genuinely are.
Beautiful. And and when you come from a loving, compassionate place, when you share, it invites love and compassion back. And that was what I was trying to tell my granddaughter, is like,
Right.
there is nothing wrong with you being you, but think about how you share it in a loving, compassionate way,
Right.
being you,
Right.
because that's all that's all we can hope for. Like I said before, we all fit together in this beautiful way when we allow ourselves to be ourselves and have love and compassion
Yes.
for our differences. you
Yes.
know uh, Somebody, there might be a reason when they're being themselves, it like triggers you, and that really isn't about them, that's about your own. And you get to explore that. And the reason I bring that up is, so when you share yourself and for some reason it triggered somebody else, that has nothing to do with there's something being wrong with what you shared. That has to do with their own their own life journey, most often it's traumas, and their reaction has to do with their traumas and not to do with you at all. So
Right.
don't allow any time that it didn't feel good when you shared to
Mm.
shut you down from sharing that beautiful, authentic person that you are. Don't allow yourself to get buried under from one little thing, buried under the should, would, could.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the last point there around sharing from the heart, I think is really good to drive home. So we're not saying sharing things where you're blaming people and you're making people
Mhm.
wrong and all this stuff, right? Because again, like Carla was saying many times, that's about you. That is not about the other person. We're
Mhm.
talking about sharing from your heart, right? Sharing from a place of love, sharing from a place of wanting to make you, them, and the world a better place.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. I I just love where this has gone today. It's just been such a beautiful thing, and just really encouraging you to share who you are. Is there any other little nuggets you wanted to share today, Shanda?
I mean, I would leave everybody with an exercise, of course, and encourage you to, again, share your feelings about this episode and your experience. Maybe you've done this before, maybe it's kind of gone sideways on you. Share that, and we can reach out to you and help you through that. Maybe we can kind of pinpoint what might have been the cause of that. But the exercise that I would lead you all to today would be to gain a better understanding of who you are, right? Even and especially the parts of you that you may not thoroughly embrace just yet, um, is to start writing a list, right? You can have two sides to it if you want, where one is like the things you like about yourself, and then there could be things that you haven't yet. I don't want to say don't like, because these aren't things that we don't like about ourselves. These are things we haven't yet embraced about ourselves.
Yeah.
And for that list, that's the trickier list. Okay. And to find out the ones that go on that list, you can very easily look at the people in your life that, again, feel like they rub you the wrong way, because those are the characteristics that need to go on your list, because those are
Yeah.
the characteristics about yourself. There's a saying around, people are mirrors for us, right? People
Yeah.
are mirrors. They're only mirroring back what we love, what we don't love, all the things. Okay. So, and then if you're somebody who might not be there yet with the self love area of things, and you find it really hard to write down things you love about yourself, ask your family, ask your friends, because they will gladly share that with you. And I'm telling you, I've done that many times in the past. I've gone to my friends, I've gone to Carla as well, and asked for their feedback. What
Yeah.
do you appreciate about me? What characteristics do you value about me? And go from there, because the more insight and awareness you can gain about yourself, the deeper you can take this work and the further you can go. So that is my encouragement. That is your homework. And I want to thank you all for listening.
Yes. And I want to tag onto that a little bit. The thing that you dislike the most, I encourage you to, if you're a journaler, journal about that. Why do you not like that about yourself? It can bring you back to a moment in your life where somebody, and like I said before, somebody else's reaction has to do with their own stuff, but somebody's reaction has told you that this is not a good thing. And just allow yourself to get some of that energy and some of those thoughts and feelings out about that thing, because like I said before, we are our biggest critic. So I really love that Shanda said, if you can't write down stuff that you appreciate about yourself, um, ask somebody else, because they will see things that you have blocked out because you have been so stuck on the other list of what is not okay with you. And so that's such a beautiful exercise to work on. And we would love to hear what you come up with.
Yes.
Even if if you don't want to put in the comments, find us on Facebook or Instagram, and just share it with us. We love to hear this. We love to be part of your journey. And so we'd love to hear about how this exercise went for you and what things really came out for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for tuning into our channel, From Head to Heart and Home, with Shanda and Carla. So if you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to subscribe so you get those notifications that we have a new one out. And we're always sharing new things. In the comments, you can put something that you would like us to talk about. We always encourage comments and you just sharing with us, because that's what we're here about. We're sharing our hearts. We would love to have yours. So bye for now.